Hello and welcome to this information webinar, which is an introduction to studying for a national professional qualification with HISP Teaching School Hub, working in partnership with Education Development Trust. My name is David Higginbottom and I'm the Deputy Director of HISP Teaching School Hub, and I also take a lead on the National Professional Qualification strand of the work that we do as two of the 87 teaching school hubs across the country. We're really proud to be a delivery partner working with Education Development Trust to deliver locally across our teaching school hub regions the full suite of the national professional qualifications. And you can see on the map there on the slide the areas that we cover as a teaching school hub. So that's Winchester, Eastleigh, Southampton, Fareham, Havant, Portsmouth, Gosport, the Isle of Wight and the New Forest. In addition to delivering the national professional qualifications as a teaching school hub, we also offer CPD and a range of professional services across the HISP region. And we also deliver early career framework training to early career teachers and mentors in schools, again, working in partnership with Education Development Trust. And we also offer to schools appropriate body services for statutory ECT induction assessment. But the focus of this information webinar today is on the National Professional Qualifications being delivered in partnership with Education Development Trust. So firstly, what I wanted to do is just start with what is an NPQ. An NPQ stands for National Professional Qualification. Now, NPQs have existed for many years now, and most people will be familiar with the NPQH, or the National Professional Qualification for Headship, and also the NPQ-SL, the National Professional Qualification for Senior Leadership. In the autumn term of 2021, a new suite of fully reformed NPQs were launched, and the NPQs are now much more specialised in terms of the specialist suite of NPQs, and I'll run through those shortly. And they've also been designed to be much more accessible to a wider group of educators with leadership aspirations. And of course, the NPQs are recognised by all educational settings, and they are recognised nationally as a professional qualifications. When the NPQs were reformed, when that new suite of NPQs was launched, workload consideration has definitely been taken into account, and the study of an NPQ is now much more manageable within the confines of modern school life or working within a modern educational establishment. And I'll talk a little bit more about that and what the workload actually looks like a little bit later on in this information webinar. If we look at the new fully reformed suite of NPQs, that fully reformed suite has been split into some leadership national professional qualifications and a set of specialist national professional qualifications. If we look at the leadership national professional qualifications first, each of those is 18 months in duration, and they are for current or aspiring executive leaders, which is the National Professional Qualification for Executive Leadership, for current or aspiring head teachers, which is the NPQH, for current or aspiring senior leaders, which is the NPQ-SL, and there is also the NPQ for early years leadership, which is for current or aspiring leaders who work in an early years setting. And I will talk in more detail about that particular leadership NPQ a little bit later on in this information webinar. There's also an early headship coaching offer available to colleagues who are early on in their career in headship. And again, I will give some more information about that a little bit later on after this overview. If we look at the specialist national professional qualifications, each of those is 12 months in duration, and therefore teachers who have current or aspiring responsibilities for leading teaching, for leading teacher development, and I will talk about the difference between those two NPQs, for leading behaviour and culture, and there is also now the NPQ for leading literacy across an educational establishment setting. The National Professional Qualification courses have been designed to allow for progression from specialist to leadership NPQs, and each NPQ is built and designed upon a framework. And to view the NPQ DFE frameworks, they are available on the DFE website, and a link is accessible here in this presentation, which will be shared with this information webinar. And if you have a look at the frameworks that are published and available, they will give you an idea of the learning outcomes of each NPQ, and they'll also help colleagues to choose which NPQ is most suitable to them at the point they're in their career professional development journey. And each of the NPQ frameworks consist of a series of learn that and learn how to statements. For colleagues who are very familiar with the ITT core content framework and the early career framework, which underpins that 2-year entitlement of support for early career teachers, you will be familiar with this layout of learn that and learn how to statements. So aspects of being an aspiring or current senior leader that you need to learn about and that you need to learn how to do in that leadership role. What I'm going to do over the next few slides is give you some more details about what the National Professional Qualifications look like if you were to choose to study for those with ourselves, working in partnership with Education Development Trust. And I think it's important at this point for me to distinguish the difference between ourselves here at HISP Teaching School Hub and Education Development Trust. Education Development Trust are one of the lead providers who have been contracted by the DFE to design national professional qualification curriculums based on each of the NPQ frameworks, and we are a local delivery partner. So the national professional qualification programs that we delivered, we've not designed the curriculum, but we deliver EDT's NPQ qualification curriculum. And what you can see in the infographic there on the slide is you can see the course duration, the number of training modules for each of the different NPQs, and you can also see in terms of time how much time is spent on face-to-face training and tutoring, on online training, on individual self-study, and you can see there the total overall time commitment for each NPQ programme of study. So 81 hours in total for NPQ SLH and NPQ EYL, which is the Early Years Leadership NPQ. Slightly longer hours of study if you want to study for the National Professional Qualification in Executive Leadership. So that's for aspiring and current leaders who are working in headship across more than one school. And 55 hours in total for that suite of specialist NPQs. To go into a little bit more detail about the leadership NPQs that are available, I'm going to start with the NPQ for early years leadership, and that's designed for leaders who are or are aspiring to be managers of private, voluntary and independent nurseries, head teachers or leaders of school-based or maintained nurseries, childminders with leadership responsibilities, and other early years foundation stage leaders such as reception class teachers or indeed early years coordinators. The National Professional Qualification for Executive Leadership is designed for school leaders who are or aspire to be an executive head teacher, or they may well have a CEO role within a school trust and therefore have responsibility for leading several different schools. The NPQ Executive Leadership is delivered centrally by the Education Development Trust education team, and the next cohort of that will begin nationally in February of 2024. The NPQ for headship is designed for school leaders who aspire to be a head teacher or head of school, and the NPQ SL is designed for school leaders who are or aspire to be a senior leader with some form of cross-school responsibility. What you can see on this infographic, and I won't read all of this information out, but for each of those leadership NPQs, what you can see across the top here, so leading improvement all the way across the classroom, those are the titles of the 4 modules or blocks of study that participants will engage in. And then what you can see for each of the leadership NPQs, you can see in more detail the focus areas for each NPQ. So for example, for senior leadership and headship, that first block is very much focused on leading improvement. You can see there for senior leadership that second block, which is looking at culture, is about how senior leaders contribute to culture and improving behaviour within their setting. If we were to look at the difference there between the culture block 2 for senior leadership and executive leadership, for executive leadership, it's much more about developing that culture at scale. And you can see there's some comparisons between the focuses of the 4 modules between those 4 leadership NPQs. There are detailed brochures available about each of these NPQs on the HISP Teaching School Hub website. What I thought it would be useful to do is for the leadership NPQs of H, SL and early years leadership is just to break down a little bit more what those hours of study actually look like. So the 16 hours of face-to-face training or tutoring for those leadership NPQs is broken down into times for face-to-face training events. And each of those training events lasts for 4 hours each. And there is one in each module or block of study. So for leadership NPQs, there are 4 modules or blocks in total, and there will be a 4-hour face-to-face training event in each. We tend to run those as afternoon sessions, beginning at 1 o'clock and then finishing at the very latest of 5 p.m. to get those 4 hours covered. The 20 hours of online training consists of 5 live webinars, which are 2 hours each. And there is 1 in blocks 1 to 3 for each leadership NPQ and 2 in block 4. We deliver those as twilight webinars. We deliver those between the hours of 4 and 6 p.m. and we tend to deliver them online via Zoom platform. There are also some recorded webinars. There's 10 in total, and they are spread out across blocks 1 to 4. There's slightly different numbers in each of the blocks, as you can see there on the slide, and they are 1 hour each, and they're pre-recorded by the education team at Education Development Trust. There's also some self-study that you have to engage in all NPQs. There's a diagnostic assessment activity that's completed at the beginning of each block, and to accompany that is a video introduction to that block. And then there's a series of reading and video-based activities per block, and also some micro implementation tasks and formative assessment activities for participants to complete to really apply their learning within their own school context. I think it's important to point out that those micro implementation tasks and formative assessment tasks are not assessed in any way. All NPQs, as stated by DfE regulations and guidelines, are assessed by a summative assessment that is sat at the end of that NPQ. So for the leadership NPQs, you study that NPQ over 18 months, and then you move into a 3-month summative assessment period if you engage with the NPQ to a certain point. And I can talk a bit more about that later on. So our next cohort of leadership NPQs are scheduled to start in October 2023, and we're calling that our cohort 5 group of NPQs because that will be our 5th cohort of NPQ programs that we are starting. Applications are open now, except for NPQ for executive leadership, which won't start until February 2024. We anticipate that EDT will close applications early in October, but we are advising colleagues to apply before spaces do run out. If you visit our HISP Teaching School Hub website by clicking directly on the link there when you get a copy of this presentation, there is a step-by-step application guide which will take you through each step of the application process, from exploring the right NPQ for you, to registering with the DfE, to applying directly with Education Development Trust and selecting us as your preferred delivery partner. And then there's also some onboarding information there as well. And we run all of those onboarding activities before each NPQ commences. Just a little bit more information about the NPQ for executive leadership. That is delivered by EDT centrally, and there is ongoing support throughout the course from Education Development Trust. There are 4 modules to work through for executive leadership, and that will be from February 2024 all the way through to June of the year 2025. I won't run through all of that information on the screen there, because if as a colleague you are particularly interested in the NPQ for executive leadership, there is a brochure available on our website, and you could also pause this webinar at this point to read through the information there if you were particularly interested in that NPQ. So moving on to think about the specialist NPQs that are available, there's that NPQ for leading literacy, which is for teachers who have or aspire to have responsibilities for leading literacy across a school or a year group or a key stage or perhaps a phase within a primary setting. I want to make it really clear that the NPQ for leading literacy isn't just for English leads or heads of English or the head of an English department or head of English faculty, but it is for those who've got a whole school or who aspire to have a whole school responsibility for the leading of literacy. The NPQ for leading teaching is designed for teachers who have or aspire to have responsibility for leading teaching in a subject, year group, key stage or phase. So it's most of our participants on leading teaching are current or aspiring heads of department, heads of phase or heads of faculty, or they are a subject leader in a primary school setting, or they are a faculty lead within a post-16 education setting. The NPQ for leading behaviour and culture is for teachers or leaders who have or aspire to have responsibility for leading behaviour and supporting pupil wellbeing in their setting. Really important to point out here that you don't just have to be a teacher or working in a teacher role to apply for leading behaviour and culture. You may well be a non-teaching head of year or deputy head of year or pastoral lead within a primary, secondary school or post-16 educational establishment or a college, for example. And equally, you would be able to apply for that NPQ. So you don't have to be a teacher to do that. And many of our cohorts before have indeed been non-teaching heads or deputy heads of year with pastoral responsibilities. The NPQ for leading teaching development is for those teachers or leaders in schools who want to or who have or aspire to have responsibility for leading the development of other teachers in their schools. They may have that responsibility for the development of all teachers or specifically trainee teachers or early career teachers. NPQ leading teaching development is a great one to do if you are mentoring an early career teacher, if you are in a mentoring or coaching role. You may well be the induction tutor or the professional mentor working with initial teacher training trainees in your school. That would be the NPQ for you. And that's really the key difference there between that one and leading teaching. Leading teaching is if you are aspiring to lead a subject. And the infographic on this slide here breaks down for those 4 specialist NPQs the title given to each of the 5 blocks of study. So there are 5 blocks over 12 months that you complete for a specialist NPQ. And that starts with leading improvement all the way through to embedding within practice. And you can see there, if we were to look at leading teaching development and leading teaching, if we were to look at block 3, developing others, we can see that for leading teaching development, that's focused on designing effective professional development, whereas for leading teaching, that's very much about developing the curriculum within your particular within a particular subject area. So there are differences there between those two, and there's often some confusion between what's the difference if I want to do leading teacher development or the leading teaching NPQ. On the slide here, you can see the hours of study broken down a bit more. So for each of the specialist NPQs, there are 2 face-to-face training events, and they are 5 hours each. So they are essentially whole day training events. There is one in module or block 1, and there is one in block 5 towards the end of the NPQ. There's 15 hours of online study. That's 4 live webinars, 2 hours each, one in blocks 1, 2, and 4, and also one in block 5. Sometimes they do vary when they take place between the blocks. But any participant who enrolls on a specialist NPQ will receive from us a very detailed participant information sheet with the blocks, the release dates of the blocks, the period of study the block covers, and the dates of any training sessions prior to the course starting once enrolment has taken place. There's also recorded webinars, and there's 30 hours of self-study, and again, some micro implementation tasks that are unassessed to help you to apply your learning within your own context or setting. Again, our next cohort of specialist NPQs commence in October 2023, so in the beginning of the new academic year. And again, we anticipate that EDT will close the applications for those early on in the month of October. If you visit our website, you've got that step-by-step application guide, which will talk and walk you through step-by-step what to do to make an application. And indeed, we've got lots of applications that are starting to come in, and applications that have been successful and that we have accepted, ready for an October start. I did want to talk briefly about the Early Headship Coaching Offer, or the EHCO. That's an unassessed face-to-face one-year package of structure support based on the latest available evidence of what makes for an effective head teacher. And there are lots of networking opportunities and also some group coaching that is available. Colleagues are eligible for that offer if they meet the criteria on the slide. You need to be within your first 5 years of headship and work in a state-funded school in England upon starting that training. And you need to have either completed an NPQH before taking up your first headship post, or currently taking the NPQH, and have not withdrawn from what was previously called the Additional Support Programme for head teachers. You've got some links there on the webinar slides, which will be available with this recording, which will take you directly to the Education Development Trust webpage about that early headship coaching offer, and also to our website where there is a flyer available about that. So why bother studying for an NPQ? How will you benefit? How will your school benefit? And therefore, how will your pupils and students and learners benefit? There's the obvious benefit to yourself as a participant for career progression and to gain an impressive nationally recognised qualification. The NPQs are designed to develop leadership skills and awareness of the latest educational research and pedagogical thinking. So through studying an NPQ, you gain access to that world-leading education research, evidence-informed practice, and knowledge exchange, working with other current and aspiring leaders and our team of expert facilitators. You'll gain an increased awareness and understanding of yourself as a leader and of those leadership behaviours in terms of how am I going to lead, or how might I aspire to lead a team, a school, or indeed a group of schools. It's really about increasing leadership confidence and competence, and it's all about implementing some kind of school improvement to drive culture and ethos, to drive curriculum, learning and teaching, assessment, and really thinking about developing organisational effectiveness at that appropriate leadership level that you work at or aspire to work at. It's really a time to reflect on your leadership practice and to be a bit selfish with your time, but to network with a wide range of school leaders. And our participants have always fed back that that's one of the things they value most about those face-to-face events, is the opportunity to get out of their school and to talk to other leaders, to talk about practice, to share ideas, and indeed to magpie and pinch ideas from other schools, and to have their thinking challenged by our facilitators in terms of their thinking and how they might be doing things in their setting now, or indeed moving that setting forward. In terms of your organisation, NPQs go beyond your own continued professional development, and there are a host of benefits for your school or organisation. Educational organisations benefit from developing a strategic approach to leadership, which is really focused on improving outcomes for young people. It gives a chance for educational establishment to access programmes which is designed to enhance staff wellbeing, agency, and ultimately to ensure recruitment and retention. It's a chance to engage in a joined-up approach to school improvement across a local region, and really to grow leadership capacity that's built on evidence-informed practice that is responsible, agile, and bespoke to individual context. Now, the short answer in terms of who can do an NPQ, anybody. And we recommend to all the schools that we work with that they follow that golden thread for their CPD development. The DfE have put together a teacher development system for this country, which starts with trainee teachers and initial teacher training based on the ITT core content framework, that then moves on to that 2-year early career teacher, early career framework based induction. And then of course there are, for those teachers and leaders who want to access this fully reformed suite of national professional qualifications. And we welcome applications from anybody. And we in the DfE believe that teachers are the foundation of the education system, and that all teachers should have access to high quality training and support to allow them to make progress. Important to point out that the NPQ programmes of study have been independently reviewed by the Education Endowment Foundation, and that ensures, along with the core content framework, along with the early career framework, that they draw upon the best available evidence of what makes for effective education. One of the questions that I frequently get asked and that my team get asked is, what is the cost of completing an NPQ? Now, for the majority, the actual cost of the programme in terms of accessing the programme is zero. For the majority, that will be fully funded for state schools and early year settings by the DfE. And I will talk more about scholarship funding and eligibility a little bit later on. I really want to emphasise at this point in this information webinar that the Department for Education have only confirmed scholarship funding for next academic year. And if the scholarship funding isn't used, then the Treasury are unlikely to allocate scholarship funding again to NPQs, because there'll be an assumption that the amount of scholarship funding that's there is not needed if there's not take-up to these NPQs. So we're really urging schools, if you are thinking about putting a number of members of staff on an NPQ, if you are thinking yourself about studying for an NPQ, take advantage of the scholarship funding whilst it is available. Of course, there is a cost in terms of your time, and I hope the information and the brochures on our website, the information on the last few slides, help to give you an idea of the time commitment. And a school or organisation are very likely to incur a cost to cover absence to attend face-to-face training sessions. So when anybody is released from school, we understand that there is a cost implication there in terms of the operational management of the school and the timetable. And there's also an expectation that schools and educational establishments will allocate an in-school sponsor or mentor to an NPQ programme participant, very likely to be the line manager within your setting. Their role is very minimal in terms of what they're required to do. They're more there for that in-school support, a colleague who you can go to in terms of that. They're not required to fill anything in for the summative assessment. They're not required to submit any paperwork or any forms about meetings or anything like that. But it's important that you do have someone who is happy to sponsor you in school, so that they're that in-school support network for you. So I said I'd talk more about the funding and the eligibility. That is available for 23-2024, so for the whole of next academic year. And from autumn of 2022, so that was the beginning of the current academic year, the organisations eligible to access scholarship funding are state-funded schools, state-funded 16 to 19 organisations, independent special schools, virtual schools, so local authority-run organisations that support the education of those children in care, hospital schools not already included in other categories, and young offender institutions as well. And local authority employed supply teachers can also access that scholarship funding if a school is happy to support them to do an NPQ. I have separated out some information about the NPQ for early years leadership, because it is a little bit different to the other NPQs in terms of who that NPQ is aimed at. and what the scholarship eligibility is for funding. So training scholarships for the Early Years Leadership NPQ are available to those leaders qualified to at least level 3 with a full and relevant qualification who are or aspire to be a manager of a private, voluntary or independent nursery, a head teacher or leader of the school-based or maintained nursery, a childminder who has leadership responsibility, and other early year foundation stage leaders such as the reception class teacher or an early years coordinator. And they need to be employed to access that training scholarship. They need to be employed in either a maintained nursery school in England, in a preschool class or nursery that's part of a maintained school in England, in a preschool class or nursery that's part of an independent school in England, providing free early years entitlements places, in a nursery that is registered on the Ofsted Early Years Register, or as a childminder, and again registered on the Ofsted Early Years Register, or with a registered childminder agency and working with early years children. If you go onto our website, there is full detail about all the NPQs, who is eligible, and what the requirements are in terms of accessing scholarship funding for those. A participant is only eligible for funding for each NPQ once. And participants who receive scholarship funding for a reformed NPQ and who then withdraw or fail that NPQ are not eligible for any future scholarship funding for the same NPQ. So for example, if you were taking the NPQ for senior leadership and you choose to withdraw, you could apply to do it again, but you wouldn't get the scholarship funding. Your organisation or school would have to pay for that. And an NPQ can cost up to £9,000, which is why we're advising schools to take advantage of the scholarship funding while it's there. If a participant is unable to continue with an NPQ, we support that participant to defer their place and restart later if appropriate, rather than withdraw, because therefore they don't lose access to the scholarship funding. Participants who've had scholarship funding for one of the legacy NPQs, so that was an NPQ that would have been started prior to the autumn term of 2021, and who withdrew from that programme, are eligible for scholarship funding for the new reformed NPQs. And that access to funding does remain conditional on validation of a participant's registration and information against the Teacher Regulation Agency record for that particular individual participant. What was really exciting at the beginning of what is really exciting is that the DfE have confirmed targeted support funding for next academic year. So for state-funded primary schools that have a pupil roll number between 1 and 150 pupils, so that's quite small primary schools, each school will receive a grant payment of £800 for each teacher or leader who they employ who starts an NPQ next academic year. For a state-funded primary school with more than 150 pupils, again, that school will get a grant payment of £200 for each teacher or leader they employ that starts an NPQ next year. For secondary schools, smaller secondary schools with 1 to 600 pupils, there is a grant payment of £200 per teacher or leader employed who starts an NPQ next academic year. And for those smaller state-funded 16 to 19 educational settings with 1 to 600 pupils, there is a grant payment of £200 again for a teacher or leader employed who starts that NPQ in next academic year. And again, the link here on this slide takes you directly to the targeted support funding grant conditions that are published on the .gov website. And that's the best place to go for the latest information. What I wanted to do is to just bust a couple of myths about the NPQs, because there are still some myths out there, despite the reform suite of NPQs being having been out there for nearly 2 academic years now. And the first myth that we sometimes have to bust is that the NPQs don't have any impact on practice. Now, all of the NPQs are evidence-based and research-based, and they're deeply rooted in the work done by the Education Endowment Foundation. And the Education Development Trust NPQs are rooted in the work done by the Sheffield Hallam University's Institute of Education. So whilst programmes across the different lead providers are different, there are more commonalities and a shared understanding of the most effective practice for leadership in schools. And All of the programs are underpinned by the Education Endowment Foundation's report on effective implementation, and what this will actually look like in your setting and how you can implement in your setting so that it has impact. So this idea that they don't impact on practice at all, I can confirm from having facilitated the NPQs and working now with over 4 cohorts of different NPQs, we are seeing an impact in schools across the HISP Teaching School Hub regions. There is a myth as well that NPQs require a lot of time out of schools. Now, I've explained that for the specialist NPQs, over that 12-month period, there's only 2 full days that you are required to be released from schools. And for the leadership NPQs over 18 months, it's only 4 days in terms of being released from schools. And to relieve the pressure on school leaders, what we tend to do for our face-to-face events is we start them at 1 o'clock and we finish them at 5 p.m. So essentially, it's only really 4 half days out of school so that leaders and heads and aspiring leaders and executive leaders can be in their establishments in the morning. We stagger those days so that each NPQ has a different day. So what we don't do is for NPQ leading teaching development, leading behaviour and culture, and leading literacy, we won't have that first full day happening at the same time for each NPQ. They're staggered. The online delivery is done as twilight, so it's after the school day, so it has a reduced impact on cover for schools. And the other tasks and aspects of the online self-study can be completed flexibly to suit different working patterns. There is still a myth out there that the NPQ requires a big, long project that you have to write up at the end of the programme of study. The project is no longer a feature of the NPQ. What participants do is complete micro implementation tasks, which focus on applying knowledge and implementing within the participant's own school or educational establishment setting. And instead, at the end of the NPQ, each participant within an 8-day calendar window, which is set by the Department for Education, you have to provide a 1,500 word written response to an unseen case study in an open book setting. And everything in the NPQ is based on work being done within your context, and therefore enables participants to focus on the needs of staff, students, learners within their own educational setting. Feedback on the legacy suite of NPQs was that before they were a bit too generic to be effective, and that was one reason for changing what was previously called the NPQ ML for middle leadership into a set of specialist NPQs. So leading teaching, which is focused on leading the curriculum for a subject, leading teaching development, which is focused on developing other professionals. And we now carefully read applications, and we do go back and hold conversations with applicants as to which programme is most suitable. So for example, we sometimes read applicants for leading teaching development where it's really clear the more suitable NPQ for that participant would be leading teaching, because they're focused on leading a subject or curriculum. We endeavour for all of our cohorts to have a local primary colleague and a secondary colleague at minimum as a facilitator. We're really proud that our facilitators are practicing teachers or leaders who work within a modern day educational setting. For our senior leadership cohorts, our facilitators are current practicing senior leaders or have very recently been senior leaders within a school. The same for NPQH. They are current or very recently retired head teachers who are delivering their NPQ. For the NPQ in early years leadership, we are working with an early years setting. And again, we've got a specialist early years setting leader facilitating the NPQ EYL. We don't always have 2 colleagues facilitating a group of an NPQ. It very much depends on the size of the group, and it depends on the phase of specialism of the participants. I do think it's worth me talking about what the summative assessment looks like at the end of an NPQ programme of study. That summative assessment has been refreshed to reduce the workload burden on teachers and leaders, and to pass an NPQ, teachers or leaders need to engage with 90% of the course and then be eligible to complete that final assessment. And that final assessment takes the form of a short assessed case study response, which will represent a likely situation to be faced by a participant at that relevant NPQ level or role. And the summative assessment tests participants on a variety of learn that and learn how to statements from their relevant NPQ framework. And as I've said, there is an 8-day calendar window to provide a 1,500 word written response to that case study in an open book setting. What we do in the final online live webinar for each of the NPQs is those are run by myself, and those are specifically focused on summative assessment readiness and getting our participants ready to complete that summative assessment. And we've now seen several cohorts through a summative assessment, and we've learned a lot about what that process actually looks like. So you might already be sold on studying an NPQ and thinking, great, how can I apply, or how can I support colleagues in my setting to apply? The first thing is that each participant needs to obtain the permission from their employer and speak to their employer before going ahead and making an application. If you visit our website, there are individual programme brochures with further details to help you decide which NPQ is right for you. All participants have to register on the DFE NPQ portal. What some schools have chosen to do, and this isn't essential, is they have an internal system of applications before deciding who is then ready to go on to apply for the full NPQ. And you may want to hold a meeting for any interested staff and then ask them to apply there and then on their mobile phones, so they can support each other with that application. And it might also be useful for a school business manager or a trust HR department to ensure that teachers are aware of their teacher reference number, because you do need one of those to apply for an NPQ. Once you have applied via and registered on the DFE portal, that's then processed through to EDT, who will send over a short application form to apply for the course directly with them. And then here at HISP Teaching School Hub, we look at the applications to decide on suitability, and then successful applications are put through to participant onboarding prior to NPQ starting. So a reminder of the dates. Our next cohorts are starting in October 2023. Applications are open now and will close in early October. Remember, the Executive Leadership NPQ will not start until February 2024. You can apply now for February 2024 start, and again, we anticipate EDT will close those applications early in February 2024. So on your application form, you have the option to state which cohort you are looking to commence your NPQ in. Is it October next year, or is it February of next academic year? You won't be able to read the detail on the application guidance there, but just a reminder that on our Teaching School Hub through this link here is a direct link for you to access a step-by-step application form. Who can you contact here at HISP Teaching School Hub if you've got further questions or queries, or you want to speak to a member of the team about NPQs? It might be an NPQ for another member of staff, it might be for yourself, or it might be across a school or a group of schools. The first point of call is our NPQ help desk, which is npqs@hispteacherschoolhub.org. That help desk is manned by my wonderful administration team, primarily Molly McBurney, who is my Teaching School Hub programme coordinator, and Candice Langley, who is my Teaching School Hub events and communications coordinator. You can get hold of either Molly or Candice on the direct telephone numbers on the screen. And equally, you're very welcome to reach out to myself. The best way to get hold of me is via my work mobile, because I'm not always based in the office. And you've also got my contact email address there as well. But for any other generic queries, please do contact our NPQ help desk via the email address that you can see on the slide. I'm going to stop this recording now so that colleagues who are attending this NPQ information webinar live can ask any questions in the chat, or indeed can unmute and ask any questions directly. So thank you for listening. We look forward to hearing from any participants and school leaders or schools with any questions that you have, but equally we look forward to receiving an application. Thank you very much.